Now, a lot of these toolbar items, it's a quick way to get to the appropriate tab, but all of these buttons that you see on the left here, from the quad element down to the bracket element, are basically just different tabs on the same dialog. So you have quads, tries, beams, and you can see it's just moving between tabs here as we select, rods, springs, or R-splines rather. Glue elements are fairly new addition. Actually, if we go through each one of these, the quads are pretty standard element. We just need the 4 points property, whether or not there is a stiffener layout, and if there is a stiffener layout, we'll need the direction. There's also a checkbox here for whether or not it's wettable, but you typically don't worry about creating it wettable when you're building the elements. You assign that later after the fact as a group modify. It's much easier to do it after the fact. So it's mainly just creating the geometry when you're building these quads. For the tries, it's essentially the same dialogue, except you can't have stiffener layouts on the try elements. Beam elements, you essentially are selecting which nodes from a quad or try that they're attached to. You select the property, and again, just like in all the other dialogues, you can select it by name or you can select it by ID number. The web orientation is specifying the direction of a beam. So as an example here, let's go ahead and create a beam on top of this strake just to show how they get created. So we'll grab 2 nodes. I didn't have that as the active. I tried to grab them from beam 0 and it wasn't my current part, so it didn't let me select those. So we'll go into the insert, which is the current part, and I select 2 nodes, and we'll just use that standard 75 by 6.5. And if I say create, it's not letting me. And it's because my web orientation right now is referencing strake number 1. And I don't know that that edge is on strake number 1. If I select this, I might be able to just click on it. Yeah, so strake number 3 is here, and strake number 4. I could probably use either one of those because that beam is on the edge of both strakes 3 and 4, and it'll grab its information from the strake as to what direction to place the beam. And there I hit modify, but I haven't actually created it yet, so modify doesn't really apply. I want to hit create. Okay, we'll ignore the strake. The way it's normally going to be defined in most of your models is by a direction. So this transverse positive, transverse negative, normal positive, normal negative is used for the frames on the strakes. The elements should be able to pick up those things from a strake when they're attached to a strake, but maybe it has to be all within a single strake. But the direction, the web orientation using a vector always works. So X, Y, and Z, we've got 0, 1, 0, Y being the vertical direction. So this should have the web pointing straight up when we create this on the beam. And it is. If we were to change that, we can make this horizontal beam by putting it in the Z direction. Or likewise, we can have it downward. This is a 10, not a 1. It doesn't have to be a unit vector here. It just has to define a direction. So that's probably the easiest way to control our beam direction. The other option here is with no offset, and that can come in handy if you have flat bar that you want to use as a flange on, say you have an opening in the deck and you want to put combing around the deck and it's supposed to be mid-height. Rather than having to create 2 bars, one projecting down, one projecting up, each half the width of the flange there, you can simply tell it not to use the offset, and it should be at the mid-height of the flat bar. I don't know why it's displaying like that, whether it's a graphics issue or something else. But that's what the offset, no offset will do. We can go ahead and delete that. Now we could delete that with the deletions dialog, or when it's selected here, we can simply say delete to remove it. Now you could imagine if you had a full deck and you needed to create stiffeners on the deck, you would be making you'd be creating an awful lot of beams, and it would be a very tedious process. So there have been a number of things to help with the modeling, some of which there are scripts available in Rhino to create the beams in a wholesale fashion, create them all at once where it extracts them from the mesh given a seed direction. There's also these wizards that were created to create different types of elements. And if we wanted to create a beam element, you can activate the wizard for a beam, and I believe we'll take the type of beam that was last created, and if you click one point and double click the next, it creates the beam. And then you click that point, double click the next. Oh, when I rotated the model, I canceled the operation. If I do it again, not sure why it is not picking this up. Let me recreate that beam. Maybe it lost what's being created here. So I'll create a beam, and then I'll go in here and use the wizard. See that one, it threw up the message, it failed to create the element, but you can see it did it a couple times there. Anyway, that's what the wizard will do. But even that was a bit slow. Oh, it was creating those beams, it created them on the top for some reason. It had the wrong normal. So let me delete those, and I will show you in the, oops, put that back in the model. Just delete this beam, these two. I created several of them when I was clicking on there. There are 3 to grab.